It wasn't the shove that shocked me. It was how natural it felt to him. One moment I was standing near the buffet, holding a small plate of roasted carrots and salmon bites. The next, my 23-year-old grandson brushed past me, no, shoved me, without so much as a glance, grabbing a spot in front of me like I wasn't there. Like I was an invisible old lady who happened to be in the way of his dinner. I didn't say anything right away. I just looked down at the plate I'd nearly dropped and then at his back, broad, in a suit too tight for his ego, laughing with the young woman beside him. His hand reached for the last bacon-wrapped scallop just as I stepped forward, plucked his plate from under his arm, and handed it to a young woman behind me. "Excuse me," I said gently, placing the full plate into her hands. "He can make another." The silence around us cracked like a pane of glass under stress. A few people chuckled nervously. Someone coughed. My grandson turned around slowly, brows furrowed. "Grandma?" he said, as if I were the one making a scene. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked past him and returned to my seat at the far end of the hall, my own plate half full, my heart strangely calm. The event was supposed to be a celebration. My late husband's brother, Charles, had turned 80. He was a kind man who'd never had children of his own, and it was his idea to host a big dinner with extended family and friends at that overly modern banquet hall on Main Street. I hadn't planned to go. My knees hurt. The weather was damp. And Charles and I had never been close. But Julia insisted. My daughter, his favorite niece. "It's important, Mom," she said. "Colton will be there." As if that would be a selling point. Colton, my only grandson. 23, tall, charming, and, lately, impossible to recognize. He used to visit every Sunday as a boy, dragging his muddy sneakers across my rug and asking for grilled cheese sandwiches. Now he texts me once a season, always needing something, usually money. After the buffet incident, he didn't come to my table. Julia did, about 15 minutes later, after the speeches had started, and the room had gone dim with flickering candles. "What was that?" she whispered, crouching next to me. "You embarrassed him." I looked at her face, too smooth for her 60 years, too taut around the eyes. "He shoved me, Julia." "He didn't mean to," she hissed. "He was just excited. He brought a guest, and he wanted to make a good impression." I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of how familiar it was, this pattern. Julia always explained him, softened his edges, smoothed the mess like I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. "He treats me like I'm in his way." Julia straightened up, smoothed her blouse. "You're taking this too personally, Mom. He's just young." No, I thought. He's not just young. He's exactly what we raised him to be. Entitled, careless, and convinced that love is something you're owed, not something you earn. And maybe that wasn't just his fault. Maybe it was ours too. Mine. Back at home that night, the dishes still needed to be put away. The leftovers from the potluck I'd brought were in a foil tray, untouched. Colton had avoided me the rest of the evening. His girlfriend never looked me in the eye. As I sat on the edge of my bed, unbuckling the low-heeled shoes I only wore for family events, a thought slid into my mind so cleanly, it scared me with its clarity. He doesn't think of me as a person anymore, just a provider. I remembered the check I'd written last month. $3,500 for a certification course Colton needed. I never got a thank you. Just a text saying, "Got it." The list was longer than I wanted to admit. Rent payments when he lost his part-time job, tuition help when he dropped out of school, groceries during the lockdowns, and even gas money. And Julia. the new dishwasher, the roof repair, the boutique therapy dog. I pulled open the drawer in my writing desk and took out the old ledger I used to balance our household budget back in the 80s. I flipped to a clean page and, with the same neat handwriting I've had since 11th grade, wrote in block letters across the top. What I have given, what they have taken. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. Just tired. And more awake than I had in years. The house was quiet. Outside, the wind blew through the dry oak leaves. Somewhere down the street, a car backfired. I closed the book and went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and stood in the window, staring at the pale moon in the sky. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank. But tonight, I allowed myself one small moment of stillness, of knowing that something had shifted, even if no one else knew it yet. They would. Soon. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. Not because of pain, though that came eventually, as it always does. It was something else. That taut, humming feeling under the skin, like standing on a hill just before a storm rolls in. I didn't even make breakfast. Just sat at the kitchen table, cradling a mug of tea that had long gone cold, staring at the paper I'd written on the night before. What I have given, what they have taken. It looked too neat for what it contained. So I flipped to the next page and started writing. $3,500 for Colton's project management course. $600 for his car insurance after the unfair ticket incident. $200 for Julia's dental work. She couldn't delay. $8,000 for the down payment on Julia's condo when she moved closer to Colton. $400 a month to cover Colton's rent when his roommate moved out suddenly. Line by line, the numbers grew. I stopped adding after a while. The sum wasn't the point. It was the pattern. They asked and I gave. They never asked twice because they never needed to. Around 9:30, I changed into my brown slacks and navy cardigan, the kind of outfit that made people think I was just another polite grandmother with time to kill. I picked up my purse, locked the door behind me, and drove my old Camry into town. The bank was only a few blocks away. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and vanilla-scented air freshener. Too clean, to be honest. A young man in a crisp shirt smiled at me as I entered. "Mrs. Mays," he said warmly. "Back so soon? Everything all right?" I nodded. "I need to speak to someone about my accounts, not the usual deposits, something more permanent." He led me into a quiet office in the back, where a woman named Rachel greeted me with a professional smile and a folder already open. She'd helped me set up my investments after Harold died. She remembered how I liked my paperwork printed in duplicate and my questions answered without being rushed. "What can I do for you today, Mrs. Mays?" I looked her in the eye. "I'd like to cancel all scheduled transfers and stop any linked payments connected to my daughter or grandson, effective immediately." Rachel blinked. "All of them?" "Yes." She hesitated for a moment, then began tapping at her keyboard. "There are quite a few, just so you know. I believe you've been covering some recurring costs?" "I know what I've been doing," I said, not unkindly. "I'm just done doing it." She nodded slowly. "All right. I'll mark each of these for suspension. We can follow up with full cancellation tomorrow, once signatures are processed." I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. It was a bright day, unseasonably warm for November. The kind of day that makes you think things can still grow. "I'm not angry," I said quietly, mostly to myself. "Just tired of being used." Rachel didn't respond, but I saw the way her eyes softened. By the time I left the bank, the town was alive with errands and lunch breaks. I stopped by the grocery store, picked up a few things for dinner, a small salmon fillet, some frozen peas, a bottle of lemon juice. Just for me. No extra snacks for Colton. No wine for Julia. Just what I liked. At home, I put the groceries away and opened the windows. Let the fresh air in. I cleaned out the front closet, gathering coats no one had worn in years. I found one of Colton's sweatshirts, something from a college he never finished, and folded it into the donation pile. I was halfway through the hall closet when the phone rang. I didn't need to look. I knew the tone. Julia. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. This time, Colton. I sat down in my reading chair, smoothed the arms, and waited. The third call came from a number I didn't recognize. Then another from Julia again. Voicemail after voicemail. I didn't check them. Instead, I made myself a sandwich, sliced it into neat triangles, and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd once cut the crusts off Colton's grilled cheese, where Julia had once painted her school posters, where Harold used to read the paper aloud just to make me laugh. It felt quiet now, but not empty. After lunch, I took the ledger back out. On the last page, I wrote 2 more lines. No more money. No more silence. I put the pen down and closed the book. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll write Colton a letter. Not an explanation, not an apology, just the truth. And when they finally come knocking, when they realize the faucet has been turned off, I'll answer. But I won't make tea. I won't fold. I'm too old to pretend I don't see what's happening, and too alive to let it continue. It took me longer than expected to find the folder. I hadn't looked through that cabinet in years. 3rd drawer down, behind old tax returns and warranty slips for appliances I no longer owned, was a worn brown accordion file marked Family. I pulled it out, set it on the kitchen table, and opened it with both hands. The first thing I saw was a check stub from 2009, Julia's emergency dental work. I remembered the chipped tooth, the tears, the sense of urgency in her voice. I'd driven her to the appointment myself and paid up front when her insurance lapsed. I remember thinking, well, that's what mothers do. Below, it was a tuition receipt with Colton's name printed in bold. Fall semester, sophomore year, $5,300. He never finished that semester. Something about hating his major. He dropped out before Thanksgiving. I started stacking the papers by type. Education, housing, medical, temporary help. None of it felt temporary now. There were at least 20 slips for Colton's rent. One of them was as recent as July. I looked at the amount, $150. I remembered the excuse. His roommate moved to California unexpectedly. Just until I get a new lease, Grandma. You know I'll pay you back. He never did. I found receipts from the boutique where Julia bought her new couch. A copy of the vet bill from when her dog got into something poisonous. Car repair invoices. Gym membership renewals. A bill for a therapy retreat Julia insisted was essential for mental clarity. The pile grew until it formed a small fortress around my tea mug. What struck me wasn't just the amount, it was the tone of it all, the assumption, the casualness. None of them had ever looked ashamed. They never paused before asking. They never even used the word borrow. It was always, can you help with? Or, would you mind covering? I looked at my calendar on the wall. November was already halfway gone. Christmas would be next. And I knew, as surely as I knew the layout of my own kitchen, that I'd soon be getting texts about gifts, travel money, and just a little extra this year. Not this time. I turned the last page of the folder and saw a faded printout. Colton's first thank you card. He must have been 8 or 9. He'd written it in block letters, colored in the lines with blue crayon. Thank you, Grandma, for the new backpack. I love you. It was taped to a piece of cardstock. Julia had mailed it with a note in her own handwriting. We're so grateful for everything you do. That was the last handwritten note I'd received from either of them. I sat with that realization for a long time. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower started up. Kids walked home from school, their laughter echoing faintly. The world kept moving. I carefully refolded the folder, tied the string around the flap, and put it back in the cabinet. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need the evidence anymore. I knew what I needed to know. That evening, I opened my email and logged into my online banking. I reviewed every transfer from the past year. There were more than 50. Some were small, $45 for Colton's textbooks, $70 for a takeout dinner Julia ordered while too tired to cook. Others were larger, recurring monthly things I hadn't even remembered agreeing to. A gym membership for Julia, a food delivery service, payments to an app I couldn't even identify. I printed the list, 5 pages in total. I made a note in the margin of each: cancel, ask, or let expire. When I was done, I felt exhausted, not from the task itself, but from the weight of the years I was sifting through. All the little choices that had led me here, not just theirs, mine too. I let it happen. I convinced myself I was needed, that this was love. But it wasn't love. It was habit. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, a kind woman named Meredith I hadn't seen in months. "Mrs. Mays," she greeted me warmly, "what can I help you with today?" "I need to set up some protections," I said. "For myself, and for someone who's earned it." There was a pause. "I'd like to explore setting up a living trust. Not for Julia. Not for Colton. For someone else." "Of course," Meredith said. "Do you have a beneficiary in mind?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Yes," I said, "but I'd rather not say just yet. Let's talk through the structure first." And we did. For the next hour, I listened as she explained the options. Irrevocable trusts. Grantor trusts. Conditional clauses. I took notes. Asked questions. And by the end of the call, I had a plan that felt like a locked door between me and the years of taking for granted. As I hung up the phone, a new kind of peace settled over me. Not the gentle kind. The strong kind. The kind that doesn't make noise but knows it's there. Colton hadn't called again. Neither had Julia. Maybe they'd seen the payments stop. Maybe they thought it was a mistake. Let them wonder. The bank lobby was nearly empty when I walked in, just after opening. That was intentional. I didn't want to run into anyone. Not a neighbor, not a friend of Julia's. Certainly not Colton. The young man at the front desk gave me the same polite nod as last time. "Morning, Mrs. Mays. Rachel's expecting you. Right this way." I followed him through the quiet hallway, heels clicking softly on the tile, past the framed stock market charts and cheerful landscape paintings meant to ease your anxiety while you rearranged your life. Rachel stood as I entered her office. "Mrs. Mays, come in. Have a seat." Everything about her space was tidy. The little succulent on her desk, the neat file stack, even the way her keyboard was aligned. It reassured me. I needed someone like her today, unflinching and meticulous. "I've got the suspension requests processed," she said, sliding a thin folder toward me. "But as we discussed, full cancellation and account protections will require a signature. I've prepared the documents. We'll go over each." I nodded. "Let's do it." We started with the basics, ending all automatic transfers to Julia's utility accounts, the joint card I'd let her use just for emergencies, and the standing grocery fund I'd set up for Colton 2 years ago. Then we moved into more permanent steps. I'd also like to remove Julia's name from my emergency contact profile, I said, and revoke her access to any account information. Rachel glanced up. Understood. Do you have a new emergency contact in mind? I hesitated. Not yet, but I'll give you one before the end of the week. Of course. The next paper was thicker. Legal language in small print. A declaration of financial independence, what they called a protective clause. Essentially, it ensured no one could access, claim, or transfer from my accounts without my signed approval. Not a daughter, not a grandson, not even a persuasive bank call pretending to be one of them. I signed without trembling. As we wrapped up, Rachel paused. You know, she said softly, most people your age make these changes because of illness. Decline. You're the first I've seen doing it out of clarity. I looked at her. I'm not doing this because I'm afraid of dying. I'm doing it because I've finally started living. She didn't smile out of politeness this time. She meant it. Good for you, Mrs. Mays. I left the bank with copies of everything. Folded into my handbag, those papers weighed less than an ounce, but they felt like armor. For the first time in years, no one had a hand in my purse. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw something unusual. A car parked in front of my house. Julia's car. She was standing on my porch, arms crossed, coat pulled tight around her, pacing a little in that jittery way of hers when she wasn't in control. She turned as I got out of the car. Mom, I've been calling. I know. She followed me to the front door. Something's wrong with the bank. My card's been declined twice. Colton says his rent didn't go through. Did you forget something? No, I said calmly. I didn't forget anything. I opened the door and stepped inside. She hesitated before following. The house was warm, the smell of lemon cleaner still hanging faintly in the air. I'd cleaned before leaving, an old habit, born from a time when I didn't know who might stop by. These days, I only did it for myself. Julia walked into the living room like she owned the walls. She sat down on the edge of the couch, as if bracing for something. Okay, she said, her voice tight. Let's just talk this through. Clearly, there's been a misunderstanding. If you had a problem with how Colton acted at the party, I raised a hand. This isn't about the party. That was just the last drop. Then what is it? It's about the last 15 years, Julia. She blinked. Excuse me? I sat across from her, folding my hands on my lap. It's about every time you needed something and called only when you needed it. About how my support became expected. About how neither of you ever ask how I'm doing unless you need me to do something. That's not true, she said quickly. Isn't it? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I saw the first flicker of unease in her eyes. Not because she was wrong, because I wasn't letting her change the subject. I've kept records, I said, of every payment, every check, every favor. Mom, come on. That's not fair. Families help each other. They do, I agreed. But this hasn't felt like help. It's felt like obligation. Yours of me, not mine to you. You're twisting this, she snapped, the mask slipping. Colton needed support. He's trying to get on his feet. He's 23, I replied evenly. He's been trying to get on his feet since he was 18, and you've been cushioning him so long he doesn't know what standing feels like. Julia stood. So that's it? You're cutting us off? I'm cutting off the part of me that thought being needed was the same as being loved. She froze. I watched her eyes flick around the room, like she was searching for something familiar, something safe to anchor to. But there was nothing here for her anymore. Not on those terms. I have to go, she said stiffly. I have work. Of course. At the door, she paused. You're making a mistake. No, I said softly. I've made plenty. But not this. She left without another word. I stood by the window and watched her car pull away. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel the urge to chase after her. The next morning, I didn't turn on my phone. It buzzed against the nightstand twice before I even made it out of bed. I silenced it without checking the screen. Let them wonder. Let them sit with the quiet for once. Instead, I pulled on my house robe, made oatmeal the way I liked it, just a pinch of salt, no sugar, and sat by the kitchen window. It had rained in the night. The garden looked soft and wet, the rose bushes drooping under the weight of their final blooms. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and stopped. My little part of the world was quiet, just the way I needed it. By 10, the landline rang. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. I wasn't being dramatic. I just wanted to hear who was on the other end before I committed. Grandma? Colton's voice. Are you there? I said nothing. I know you probably don't want to talk, he continued after a moment, but I really need to understand what's going on. My rent bounced, my phone bill too, and Mom's freaking out. She won't say much, but she looked like she'd seen a ghost when she came back yesterday. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. I mean, if I did something wrong, at the party or before, I want to fix it. Okay? Can we just talk? He paused, waiting. I held the phone for a moment longer, then spoke quietly. It wasn't one thing, Colton. It was everything. Okay, he said slowly. Can you help me understand what that means? No, I replied. Not today. And I hung up. I stood by the phone for a few seconds, breathing. I wasn't angry. Not really, not yet. I just didn't feel like explaining myself anymore. Not after years of being expected to fix every mess quietly, without questions. The texts started up again by lunch. I turned the phone on for one brief moment, just to check the time, and watched the notifications pour in like hail. Mom, call me now. Grandma, I'm really worried. This is ridiculous. I don't know what you're trying to prove. Please don't do something drastic. We can talk, just say what you want. Be an adult about this. That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it said so much. Be an adult. As if I hadn't been one longer than he'd been alive. As if silence, for once, wasn't the most grown-up thing I could do. By 3 o'clock, Julia called again. I didn't answer. Then Colton. Then someone named Megan. I assumed that was the girl from the party. They were trying every door, every window. But I'd shut the house from the inside. I took a nap in the late afternoon, the kind of nap you don't mean to take but sink into anyway. When I woke, the sun had dipped behind the trees, and my living room was painted in golden lines. I made myself a grilled cheese, like the ones I used to make for Colton when he was small. I didn't feel nostalgic, just hungry. After dinner, I opened the old wooden box where I kept paper letters, real ones, with handwriting and postage stamps. I hadn't added anything new in years. Most were from my sister Ruth before she passed. Some were from friends long moved away or gone quiet. But each letter felt solid. Someone, somewhere, once cared enough to sit and write. I hadn't received anything like that from Julia in more than a decade. By 8, the phone buzzed again. one new message, this one from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Mrs. Mays, this is Megan. I hope it's okay that I texted. I was at the party with Colton. I just wanted to say I saw what happened at the buffet. I don't think he realized what he did. But I saw it. And I think you were right to be upset." I stared at the message for a long time. She was the girl I'd handed his plate to. The only person who had looked surprised, then grateful. I remembered the way she'd smiled, hesitant, but genuine. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to open the door again, but I didn't block her. That was something. At night, I sat in my reading chair with the lights low and a blanket over my knees. I didn't reach for a book. I didn't even put the radio on. I just sat there, listening to the quiet creak of the house, the wind shifting the shutters, the distant hum of a world that kept moving without me. It didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. The phone buzzed one more time just before bed. A voicemail from Julia. "Mom, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't how we do things. We're family, and family doesn't just cut each other off without a conversation. This is cruel, Mom. You're hurting us. And for what? You're going to be alone? Is that what you want? Is that what this is?" She didn't cry. Julia never cries. But there was a tremor in her voice, the kind that comes when someone's grip on power starts to slip. I didn't save the message. Instead, I brushed my teeth, put on my nightgown, and tucked the folder of bank documents into the drawer beside my bed. Let them feel what I've felt for years. Silence, uncertainty, and being left out of things that matter. Let them sit with it. I didn't sleep much that night. It wasn't nerves, not exactly. It was that peculiar alertness that comes when you know something is shifting, something inside you, something permanent. The kind of shift that makes sleep feel irrelevant. At dawn, I got up, made tea, and sat at the dining room table with a blank sheet of paper. I hadn't written a letter by hand in years, not a real one anyway. But this needed to be more than a message, more than a quick reply tapped out on a screen. This needed to be felt. I picked up my pen and began. "Colton, you've called several times, and I've let the phone ring. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I needed time to sit with what I felt before I gave you words. I've spent the last 2 decades helping you grow, support yourself, and, when needed, get back on your feet. I did it willingly. I did it with love. But love, as I'm coming to learn, is not a license for one-sided arrangements. I don't resent the money. I resent that it became a given. I resent that you could shove your grandmother aside at a buffet and not notice, not apologize, not even look back. I resent that when I took your plate, you looked at me like I was the one embarrassing you. That moment, Colton, wasn't an accident. It was a mirror. And what I saw reflected wasn't unfamiliar. It was exactly what you've become. Comfortable with taking, uncomfortable with being questioned, and completely at ease putting yourself first. You've grown into a man who believes he is owed, not one who builds. I don't say this to hurt you. I say this because, for once, I need you to hear me when I'm not bailing you out. You are 23 years old. You are capable. And from this day forward, you will be expected to live accordingly. I won't be sending any more money. I won't be covering your rent, your phone bill, your surprise emergencies. I won't be answering calls that come only when things fall apart. You've asked me more than once what I want. Here it is. I want to be treated like a person, not a wallet. I want to be asked how I'm doing, not how much I can spare. I want you to show up without a request in your back pocket. That's the cost now, not money, presence, accountability, respect. If you can offer that, my door is open. If you can't, then maybe some space will serve us both. With hope, Grandma. I folded the letter neatly, slid it into an envelope, and addressed it in my careful block handwriting. I could have sent it by text, but I wanted him to hold it. I wanted him to feel the weight of it in his hands, the way I had felt the weight of all his requests over the years. At noon, I walked it down to the mailbox myself. No coat, just a sweater. The wind sharp against my face. It felt good. Clean. Back home, I didn't wait for the fallout. I didn't sit by the phone. I didn't check the door. Instead, I went upstairs and opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years. My wedding veil, Harold's military medals, a small box of photos Julia never asked to take. Some of Colton, too, baby teeth still in envelopes, scribbled birthday cards from when he still used crayons. I looked through them slowly. Let myself remember the softness before the edges. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. I didn't move. A second ring, then silence. No voicemail followed. No knock on the window. Whoever it was, they left without forcing entry. Good. That evening, I made soup. Just for me. I ate at the table, with the lamp on low and a soft record playing in the corner. Billie Holiday. The kind of music that makes you feel like someone's sitting with you, even when no one is. I thought about Harold, about what he would say. Not in words, but in that quiet way he had of affirming a decision by simply not correcting it. After dinner, I folded laundry, paid the water bill, marked a doctor's appointment on the calendar. Life went on, as it always does, without fanfare. Before bed, I checked my phone once. No new messages. Nothing from Colton. Just as well. This wasn't a story that needed a dramatic reaction. It didn't need shouting or slammed doors. It needed space and silence. And for once, I was letting both do their work. I used to love Tuesdays, not for any grand reason, just the rhythm of them. When Harold was alive, Tuesdays were the one day we both finished early. He'd come home by 4. I'd put something simple in the oven, a roast, maybe a chicken, and we'd sit out back with 2 cups of coffee before the sun dipped. That was before Julia, before bills and businesses and all the layers that settle on you over time like dust you forget is there. Today was a Tuesday, but the quiet felt different, not empty, exactly, just unfamiliar. I spent the morning in my little library, though calling it that was generous. Just a room at the back of the house with wall-to-wall shelves, a green armchair Harold insisted wasn't his, and a lamp that flickered on one side unless you jiggled the cord. It had always been mine, even when the rest of the house wasn't. The place I went to think, or not think, where the books still smelled like the used stores I'd plucked them from. History, poetry, a few mysteries I never admitted I liked. I touched the spines one by one, as if I were greeting old friends I'd ignored too long. There was a time I read a book a week. That was before Julia's divorce, before Colton's first tuition bill, before the string of years when rest became a luxury I loaned to other people. I picked up a worn paperback, Maya Angelou, and sat in Harold's chair. It still leaned slightly to the left. I still leaned with it. I didn't read. Not right away. I just sat there, letting the silence pool around me. I thought about who I was before I became a mother, before I became a grandmother. I wasn't someone who said yes to everything back then. I had sharp edges, opinions, a job I liked, friends I saw without asking permission. I used to dance, not professionally, nothing fancy. But I'd take myself down to that little studio on Fifth, pay $5 for a drop-in class, and sway through an hour of jazz or swing, limbs loose and mind clear. I'd come home flushed and laughing. Harold would tease me. "You trying to leave me behind, woman?" "No," I'd say. "I'm just trying to find the parts I left behind myself." I stopped going when Julia was born, told myself it was just until she slept through the night, until the bills were settled, until we had more time. But time doesn't come back just because you asked it to wait. I stared at the book in my hands, the cover faded and creased. I realized I hadn't touched this one in nearly 20 years. The dedication on the inside was in Harold's handwriting. For the woman who never needed anyone's permission to speak. I closed it gently. Maybe it was age, or wisdom, or just exhaustion. But somewhere along the line, I stopped speaking. Stopped asking for anything that didn't serve someone else. Meals, money, time, all of it rationed out like tokens, as if my worth lived in what I gave. Now I was left with the quiet. And oddly enough, it felt like coming home. At noon, I made myself lunch. An omelet with chives from the backyard. Sat on the porch to eat it, legs wrapped in a blanket, breeze brushing my ankles. The neighbor's dog barked once. A child laughed somewhere far off. For the first time in weeks, no calls, no texts, just stillness. I didn't miss them. What I missed was myself. The woman who once saved for plane tickets, not other people's broken leases. The woman who baked for pleasure, not apology. The woman who knew how to say no without guilt hanging on her shoulders like a wet coat. That woman was still here, just quieter now, patient, waiting. I went back inside and found an old notebook, hardcover, green, barely used. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote, in large print, "What I forgot I loved. Mornings with no voices but the birds, cooking without rushing, jazz music on scratchy records, the feel of paper in my hands, letters, dancing, laughing for no one's benefit, sitting still." I stopped after that. Not because the list was done, but because something warm settled in my chest. The reminder that I wasn't just someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's financial safety net. I was Myron, who loved to read in the afternoons, who once wore yellow even though she hated standing out, who swam in lakes without caring about her thighs, who could be alone without being lonely. I closed the notebook, placed it on the shelf next to the books I planned to reread, and stood in the window as the sun shifted westward. Outside, everything looked the same. Inside, I was beginning to remember who I was. The law office hadn't changed in years. Same creaky brass bell above the door. Same stack of outdated magazines on the coffee table. Same receptionist, Deborah, with her gentle voice and oversized glasses. She'd worked there since before Harold passed, and she always offered me tea even though I always declined. "Mr. Lyle will be with you in just a moment," she said. I nodded, clutching the file folder in my lap. It held everything. Bank summaries, a list of changes I'd typed up myself, notes from the trust consultant Meredith had recommended. I'd read it through 5 times, memorized the language, the structure. Today wasn't a day for surprises. It was a day for structure, for decisions that didn't ask for anyone's approval but my own. When Lyle opened the door to his office, he smiled in that familiar, mild-mannered way of his. He had a kind face, creased, but not tired. A man who knew how to listen. That's why I came to him. Mrs. Mays, he said warmly, extending a hand. It's good to see you again. And you. I sat across from him at the long wooden desk, sunlight streaming in from the window behind. The office smelled like paper and lemon polish, clean, honest. What brings you in today? I passed the folder across the desk. I want to make changes to my will, and I want to set up something else, too. A trust. He opened the folder, skimmed the first page, then looked up. All right. You're clear about what you want? Crystal. We started with the will. The original version, written almost 10 years ago, split everything evenly between Julia and Colton. At the time, it had felt safe. Obvious. Family, after all. Who else? But that was before I learned the difference between presence and proximity. Before I learned that blood is not always a bond. It's sometimes just an assumption. I'd like to change the beneficiaries, I said plainly. Julia and Colton are to receive a modest sum each, fixed, not percentage-based. And the remainder? I'd like it placed in a living trust, I said. In my name, but structured for education and health needs. For someone else. He raised an eyebrow. You've chosen a new beneficiary? Yes. I passed him the name written in careful print on a slip of paper. He read it, then looked up again, this time more thoughtfully. She's not a direct relative? No. She's a friend? I smiled. Let's call her an act of clarity. He nodded, didn't ask further. That's why I trusted him. And the structure of the trust? No cash withdrawals, educational expenses only, tuition, books, housing if she's enrolled, and later medical needs if necessary. No discretionary payments, no access for anyone else. Lyle made notes as I spoke, his pen scratching softly. Would you like the same executor, or— No, I said firmly. Remove Julia from that role. I'd prefer an independent fiduciary. I can recommend one. Good. For the next hour, we worked through the details. Durable power of attorney revoked, healthcare proxy reassigned, safety measures around property title and savings. Every document reinforced the same idea. The part of my life that had been handed out freely was no longer available on demand. At one point, Lyle leaned back and looked at me. May I ask what prompted all of this? I thought for a moment. A shove, I said finally. It wasn't just about me being pushed aside. It was realizing how long I'd let them do it. He nodded slowly. Well, he said, you're certainly not the first. But you're one of the few who does something about it. I signed each document with a steady hand. No hesitation. Not anymore. By the time I walked out into the early afternoon sun, I felt lighter. Not like someone who had lost anything, but like someone who'd finally put something down. I passed the bakery on the corner and on a whim stepped inside. The air smelled of cinnamon and butter. I bought a small lemon tart. Just one. I didn't have to think about who liked what. Didn't have to factor in someone else's allergy or preference. It was what I wanted. Back home, I made tea and sat in the kitchen, the tart on a saucer, the light from the window warming the table. I thought about the name I'd written on that slip of paper. No one would expect it, least of all her. But that was the point. She had done nothing to earn it, nothing but notice me, the way no one else had in years. And that, I had decided, was worth more than decades of polite neglect. Julia showed up on a Thursday. I'd been expecting it, in the way you expect the first frost. Inevitable, unwelcome, and always colder than it should be. She didn't call first. Just pulled into the driveway around 10 in the morning, her silver sedan idling for a few seconds before the engine shut off. I watched from the front window as she sat in the car for a moment, fixing her hair in the mirror, adjusting her blouse. A woman preparing not for a conversation, but a performance. She knocked once, sharp and purposeful. I opened the door, not slowly, not warmly, just enough to let her in. "Hi, Mom," she said, stepping past me like the door had opened itself. She hadn't brought coffee, or flowers, or anything except that tight little smile she used when she wanted something and didn't want you to know it yet. I didn't offer her tea. She sat anyway, straight-backed on the edge of the couch, like a woman who wasn't planning to stay long but needed to make an impression. "I've been trying to give you space," she began. I didn't respond. I sat across from her, hands folded in my lap. She shifted. "But this is starting to feel extreme." That word again. The one people use when you stop letting them take. "I don't know what's going on with you," she said. "First, the money stops. Then the voicemail. Now Colton tells me you wrote him a letter like he's a stranger." "He read it then?" "Yes. And he's hurt." I looked her in the eye. "I imagine that's new for him." Julia's mouth tightened. "That's not fair." "No," I said softly. "It's not. None of it has been." She leaned forward slightly. "Mom, you can't just shut people out like this. We're family." "So you've said. Often. Especially when you need something." Her eyes narrowed, but she kept her voice even. "I don't know what Colton did to push you this far." "It's not just Colton." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's the years," I said. "All of them. The years of calling only when something broke. The years of leaving me off guest lists, but on bank forms. The years of treating my help like a subscription you were owed." She stood then, as if motion might give her words more weight. "That's not true. I've always appreciated you. You've always been important." "Important?" I repeated. "Julia, you moved across town and didn't give me your new address until Colton needed help with tuition. You brought me to your house only when you needed a babysitter. You send birthday cards with unsigned checks inside, and not once have you asked me how I'm really doing." "I've been busy," she snapped. "We're all busy," I said. "But we make time for what matters. And I stopped being one of those things for you a long time ago." Her eyes went glassy. Not tears. Frustration. She didn't like being cornered. Not like this. "I'm sorry if you feel that way," she said finally, the sentence as empty as it always had been. "I don't feel that way," I replied. "I know it." She looked down, took a deep breath, then sat again. "Okay. Then let's talk about what you do want. What's it going to take to fix this?" "I'm not asking you to fix anything," I said. "I'm just not playing the part anymore. The provider. The silent supporter." "You changed your will," she said suddenly, her voice low. So Colton had told her. "I did. To what?" "That's no longer your concern." Her head whipped up. "I'm your daughter." "And I'm a woman with choices," I said quietly. "I'm not punishing you, Julia. I'm protecting myself." "You think that trust will love you like we do?" I almost laughed. Love doesn't push its way to the front of a buffet line and knock over the woman who raised it. Love doesn't go silent until bills are due. She stood again, shook her head. "You're not well, Mom. You're isolating. This isn't like you." "You're right," I said. "It's not like the me you're used to. but it's exactly who I've always been. I just stopped hiding it." She stared at me for a long time. Her lips parted, then closed. She had no more angles left. No script. "Goodbye, Julia," I said. She didn't argue. She picked up her purse, walked to the door, and hesitated with her hand on the knob. "You'll regret this," she said, not cruelly. Almost sadly. "No," I said. "I've already regretted too much. This won't be one of them." She left without slamming the door. That wasn't her style. But the silence she left behind was louder than anything she could have said. And it didn't scare me. Not anymore. He came on a Saturday. I heard the car before I saw it. Engine too loud for the size of the driveway. Music muffled but thumping through the closed windows. He turned it off before getting out, like maybe that would make a difference. Like maybe quieting the noise now could erase the noise of everything before. Colton stood by the porch for a moment. I watched him from the window. Tall, stiff, clean-shaven like someone told him to look respectful. A jacket too thin for the weather. His hand hovered near the doorbell before he knocked instead. Just once, then stepped back. I opened the door and said nothing. "Hi," he said. I nodded. He looked past me, into the house. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He entered slowly, scanning the room like something might have changed. It hadn't. Not really. The same rug he used to run across in his socks. The same lamp he once knocked over and cried about, afraid I'd be angry. I never was. He sat on the edge of the couch, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Hands clasped. Nervous. I stayed standing. "I got your letter," he said. I waited. I didn't know what to say at first. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "But I want to." He looked up at me, his eyes too familiar, too grown to belong to the boy I remembered, too young to match the man he was supposed to be. "I didn't realize how much I'd taken for granted," he said, "until I saw it written down." That surprised me. He wasn't the type to read between lines, let alone within them. "I always thought you'd be there," he went on. "Like no matter what. I guess I got used to it. And then I saw it all in your handwriting, and it hit different." Still, I didn't speak. I wanted to see what he said when I didn't soften the silence. "I never meant to hurt you," he said. "At the party, I wasn't thinking. I didn't even realize I'd pushed you. There was food, and Megan was right there, and I was trying to—" He stopped. "Trying to impress someone?" I asked. He nodded. "And you thought stepping over your grandmother would do it?" He winced. I didn't see it that way. Not then. "How do you see it now?" He looked down at his hands. "Like I became someone I don't like." That sat between us for a while. I walked over, slowly, and sat in the armchair across from him. My chair. The one where I'd held him when he was small and feverish. The one where I'd sat writing checks I wasn't thanked for. "What do you want, Colton?" I asked. "Why are you here?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't want money," he said finally. "That's good, because there won't be any." He smiled a little, sad. "Yeah, I figured. Then why are you here?" "I guess. I want to know if I ruined this." "This?" I asked. "You. Us." I exhaled slowly. "It's not ruined. It's just not free anymore." He looked confused. "Your place in my life, it's not automatic now. It has to be earned, maintained, like any real relationship." He nodded slowly, like he was trying to understand a new language. "I don't expect perfection," I said. "But I do expect presence. Thought. Effort." "I can do that," he said quietly. "Then start." How? I shrugged. That's not my job to figure out anymore. That's yours. He sat back against the couch, the tension in his shoulders softening. I started working full-time last month, he said, at a logistics company. I've been walking to work, saving for a car. That's a start. He nodded. We sat in silence for a few moments. Megan broke up with me, he said suddenly. I looked at him. Was it because of what she saw? He nodded. She said she didn't like the way I looked at you. Said if I could treat family like that, I'd treat her the same eventually. Smart girl. Yeah. He ran a hand through his hair. I want to do better. Not just look better. Be better. Then do it, I said, without expecting applause. He looked up. Can I still come by? Not for anything, just to visit. Yes, I said, but not every visit has to be a redemption arc. Sometimes just showing up is enough. He smiled, genuinely this time. I missed your grilled cheese. I still make them, but now they come with expectations. He laughed, a little too loudly, too fast, but it was real. I'll take expectations over silence, he said. We didn't hug. Not then. That would have been too easy. Too soon. But when he left, I didn't watch from the window. I stayed seated in my chair, letting the silence return on its own, and it didn't feel empty. It was the kind of day no one remembers. Gray sky, soft wind, a low hum of passing time. The kind that used to slip by me unnoticed, buried under obligations and errands, answering texts, transferring funds, planning around other people's needs. But now, it was mine. I woke without an alarm. No appointments, no noise. Just the quiet rhythm of breath and fabric and the soft creak of the old headboard when I sat up. I made the bed the way I always had, smoothing the corners, fluffing the pillows, not because anyone would see, but because I liked the way it looked, like something done on purpose. In the kitchen, I boiled water for tea. Loose leaves this time, Earl Grey, strong and fragrant, and poured it into my favorite mug. Not the one I used when company came, not the one Julia gave me for Mother's Day 3 years ago with world's best grandma in pink glitter that chipped after 3 washes. No. The plain white one with the small chip in the rim, the one Harold bought me from a roadside antique shop on our way to Michigan, back when detours felt like part of the plan, not a mistake. I sat at the table in silence. No radio, no television. Just the wind outside and the occasional creak of the house settling. For once, the quiet didn't feel like a question waiting to be answered. It felt like company. After breakfast, I went out to the garden. I'd neglected it the last few seasons. The azaleas had grown wild, the sage long gone to seed, but the soil was still good. You could feel it in the way it held your palms. I pulled on gloves, grabbed the rusted trowel from the shed, and spent the next 2 hours on my knees, loosening roots, clearing debris, letting the earth remind me what real work felt like. The kind that ends when you say so. By noon, my back ached, and my legs felt like someone else's. But I smiled anyway. Dirt on my sleeves, dirt in my hair. I hadn't touched anything digital all morning. Not a screen, not a ringtone. The silence was still with me. I made lunch, soup from scratch, not a can, and ate it on the porch, wrapped in a sweater. I watched a sparrow hop across the fence line, tilting its head, the way birds do when they're deciding whether to trust the world again. I knew the feeling. In the afternoon, I did laundry, folded each shirt with care, put on a record, jazz, something slow. I even lit a candle, lavender. Not because anyone was coming over, but because I liked the scent. I caught myself humming. There was a time when I lived like this all the time. Before the calls, before the emergencies, before I turned into someone who responded instead of acted. In the hallway, I passed the bookshelf and paused. That little green notebook still sat there. I opened it again to the page I'd started. What I forgot I loved. I added a few more. The smell of earth after rain, socks warm from the dryer, tea that doesn't get cold while you're answering someone else's crisis, books with underlined sentences, mornings that begin on my own terms. I ran my fingers over the ink, then closed the book. Later, I sat in my reading chair with a blanket over my legs. The same chair I'd sat in through storms, arguments, silent dinners, and holiday phone calls that felt more obligatory than joyful. But now, it felt like mine again. No one called that day. No one knocked. There was no update from Julia. No apology. No sudden realization, and I didn't need one. Colton hadn't messaged either. That was fine. He had said his piece. Now he had to live it. I wasn't keeping score. I just wasn't playing anymore. By evening, the wind picked up. I lit another candle, cooked a small dinner, just an omelet, toast, and a few strawberries. Sat down, ate slowly, washed the dishes, dried them, and put them away. Each motion deliberate. No one else needed anything. Not tonight. Maybe not for a while. I opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph. Not of the family, just me. Early 20s, wearing jeans and a sleeveless top, hair windblown, laughing at something outside the frame. I stared at her for a long time. "I'm sorry it took so long," I whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She looked patient. That night, I went to bed without checking my phone. No screens, no final scroll. Just me, the dark and the soft sound of a house finally at peace with itself. And I slept. Fully. Without interruption. Without waiting for someone to need me. The envelope was pale blue and slightly uneven, like it had been folded and refolded more than once. No return address. Just my name, Mrs. Mays, written in careful handwriting, the kind people don't use anymore. The postmark was from across town. It arrived on a Tuesday. I held it in my hands for a moment before opening it, tracing the ink with my thumb. Not a bill, not a promotion, not a donation request with my name badly printed in bold. A real letter. Inside, one sheet of paper, lined, torn from a notebook, the handwriting small, slightly unsure. "Dear Mrs. Mays, I hope you don't mind that I'm writing. I asked Colton for your address, and he gave it to me. Said I could reach out if I wanted to. I wasn't sure if I should, but I kept thinking about that day at the party. I've replayed it in my mind so many times. I don't know if you noticed, but I was standing right there. I saw the whole thing. The way Colton stepped in front of you. The way you looked at him. Not angry, just disappointed. And then you took the plate and gave it to me. I didn't know what to do. I said thank you, but I don't think it was enough. I went home that night and told my roommate that something about you stuck with me. The way you held yourself. The way you didn't say a word, but somehow said everything. I don't know your whole story. I don't know what led to that moment. But I've seen enough to know when someone's been overlooked. And I've seen how people treat women when they get older. How easy it is for them to be treated like background noise. But you weren't background that day. You were the most visible person in the room. And not because you demanded it, but because you refused to disappear. I just wanted to say that I saw you. Really saw you. And that it mattered. I hope you're doing well. And I hope Someday. I carry myself with half as much quiet strength as you did that afternoon. With respect, Megan, I read it twice, then a third time. By the end, I was sitting down. The letter rested on the table, one hand flat beside it. I wasn't crying, not really, but something loosened behind my ribs. Something I hadn't even realized was clenched. It had been years, maybe decades, since someone noticed without needing something in return. She'd seen the plate, yes, the gesture. But more than that, she'd seen me. The weariness, the restraint, the years behind my silence. She'd read all of it like a poem someone else might have skimmed. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it back into the envelope. Later that afternoon, I wrote her back. Dear Megan, your letter arrived on a gray day. The kind of day that passes without much note unless someone decides to mark it. You marked it. Thank you for seeing what others often don't. That moment at the party wasn't planned. It wasn't even dramatic, not really. Just a small shift. But small shifts can move oceans if they happen deep enough. I don't think Colton meant harm. I think harm just became invisible to him. I think he believed help was love, and love was quiet, and quiet meant yes. But that's not true. You saw it. And I'm grateful. You carry yourself with more than potential. You carry intention. That matters more than you know. Take care of yourself. And write when you like. There's room in this house for voices that don't want to take. Sincerely, Marin Mays. I signed it slowly, carefully. It had been so long since I'd written to someone who might actually write back. I walked it to the mailbox before dusk. The wind had picked up again, and the first leaves were beginning to turn on the oak tree in the yard. Seasons changing, like they always do. But now, I felt it differently. This was no longer a house of waiting. It was a house of choosing, and someone had chosen to see me. That counted for more than almost anything else. The call came in the evening. I almost didn't pick up. The screen lit up with her name, Julia, and for a few seconds, I let it ring. The house was quiet, the kettle still warm from dinner, and the sky had just turned that bruised lavender color that only lasts a few minutes. But something made me press answer. Hello? I said, voice even. There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice, softer than I remembered. Hi, Mom? I didn't speak. I wanted to know where this was going before I gave it shape. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up. I wasn't sure either. Another pause. Then, Colton said he came by. He did. He told me a bit, said you talked, said you didn't yell. I don't yell, I said. I know. That's part of the problem, I guess. She exhaled, long and slow, like someone bracing herself. I've been angry with you, she said, since that day. I know. But not for the reason I told myself. I leaned back into the chair, phone pressed lightly to my ear. I think, she continued, I was angry because you stopped playing the part. Because I thought you always would. I told myself you liked being needed. That it gave you purpose. It did, I said quietly, until it didn't. She didn't answer right away. I didn't realize how much I leaned on you, she said, or how little I offered back. That's because I didn't ask, I replied. And when you don't ask, people assume they don't need to give. There was the sound of her shifting, maybe sitting down. I've been thinking about when I was younger, she said. You were always there, even when I was cold, even when I was too proud to say thank you. And I thought, I don't know, that you wanted it that way. I did, for a while. She let that sit. I'm sorry, she said finally. Not dramatic, just steady. I believe you. But I don't expect you to fix anything, she added. I just wanted to say it. That, more than the apology, caught me off guard. It wasn't her usual rhythm. She wasn't building up to a request. I don't hate you, Julia, I said. I know, she replied. And I don't hate you either. I had this idea of what you were supposed to be. And when you stopped, it felt like a betrayal. It wasn't, I said. It was survival. I get that now. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights sweeping across the far wall. I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we were, she said. We won't, I said plainly. But we might become something new. There was a long pause. I'd like that, she said. We sat in the silence for a few seconds, the kind that doesn't press, doesn't rush. Then she asked almost shyly, Do you still make that rice pudding with the orange zest? I do. Another pause. Could I come by sometime? Not now. Just when it feels right. You can, I said. But if you come, don't bring your guilt. Bring yourself. I'll try. We didn't say goodbye. She hung up first. Or maybe I did. I don't remember. But when the call ended, I stayed in my chair, holding the phone loosely, the way you might hold a stone you've carried too long. It didn't feel like a reconciliation. Not yet. But it felt like something real. And that was enough. The morning came with rain. Soft, steady, the kind that didn't rush you. I left the curtains drawn and let the gray light settle into the rooms. There was something comforting about it, like the house was exhaling. I moved slowly through the day. Not from age, not from pain, just choice. I had no errands, no calls to make. No one expected anything from me, and that absence of expectation felt almost luxurious. The mail arrived just after noon. One envelope, pale yellow this time. Megan again. Her handwriting was firmer now, more confident. I opened it standing in the kitchen, the kettle just starting to whisper on the stove. Dear Mrs. Mays, thank you for your letter. I read it 3 times. You're right. Small shifts can move oceans. I'm applying for a 2nd degree. Social work. I've been thinking about the kind of person I want to be when I walk into a room, and I want to be someone who notices what others don't. Someone who stays when it's uncomfortable. Someone who doesn't need noise to be heard. You taught me something in a single afternoon. Not because you meant to, but because you were willing to let the moment speak. I hope I can carry that forward. Thank you again for the plate, for the silence, for everything that came after. With care, Megan. I folded the letter slowly, pressing the crease down with my thumb. I didn't need to write back right away. Some things deserve to echo a little first. Later in the afternoon, I heard footsteps on the porch. Not rushed, not hesitant, just measured. A knock, light but steady. Colton. He held 2 cups of coffee, one in each hand, looking almost sheepish under the dripping eaves. Thought I'd stop by, he said. Didn't text. Figured I'd take the risk. You brought a peace offering? He grinned. I brought caffeine. You can decide what it means. I took the cup and stepped aside. He kicked off his shoes at the door like he used to when he was small. It was second nature. We sat in the kitchen. No speeches this time. No heavy talk. Just sips and silence. He glanced around. The place feels different. It is. I like it. I smiled. I do too. He pulled a small envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Don't get excited. It's not money. Just something I wanted to show you. Inside was a printed pay stub. His name at the top. Full-time hours. Direct deposit. I didn't ask for proof, I said. I know. he replied, but I needed to know you'd see it. Then I'm glad you brought it. He didn't stay long, just enough to let the coffee cool. Before leaving, he hesitated by the door. You still working on that garden? I nodded, bit by bit. Need a shovel, man? I raised an eyebrow. You? He grinned. Turns out I don't mind getting my hands dirty when it's not about cleaning up my own mess. I laughed, just once, but it felt full. Come by Sunday, I said. Bring gloves. He nodded, a little taller in his posture, and left without overplaying the moment. The rest of the evening passed like breath. I watered the houseplants, fed the stray cat that sometimes came by, played a record, not jazz this time, something softer. Folk, maybe. The kind of music that doesn't demand attention, but makes space for memory. Before bed, I pulled the notebook down again. What I forgot I loved, I added. Letters from strangers. Coffee that isn't rushed, rain without errands, conversations with no apology, sons who grow into men, days without needing to explain. I set the pen down. Tomorrow would come, same as always. I didn't need it to bring anything. It could just arrive, soft as rain, and I'd be here, present, not waiting, not shrinking, not forgetting, just here. The sun came early, not loud or blazing, just steady. A quiet, golden stretch across the floorboards, warming the kitchen tiles, brushing the tops of the cabinets. I stood by the window, a cup of tea in hand, and watched the light move. I'd forgotten how soft morning could be when it belonged only to you. The house was still, not with emptiness, but with calm. Nothing waited to be solved. No voices waited to be answered. Just me, the light, and the garden outside, beginning to wake with its own slow rhythm. I stepped into my shoes, pulled on my old sweater, and went out back. The air had that early autumn crispness, cool but not cold, and the soil was damp from last night's rain. The rose bush was bare now, just thorns and fading stems. But the sage had surprised me, coming back stronger after the last pruning. Some things do that. I bent to pull a few weeds near the fence. My knees popped the way they always did, and I chuckled to myself. Not in complaint, just acknowledgement. This was the cost of time, and I'd earned every sound. As I worked, I heard footsteps behind me. Morning, Colton said. I didn't turn. You're early, I said. You said Sunday. I figured that included sunrise. I straightened, wiped my hands on my pants, and looked at him, gloves in one hand, a thermos in the other. You brought coffee? He held it out. With oat milk. Don't act like I don't pay attention. I took it. Sipped. Acceptable. He grinned. We worked quietly for a while. I pointed where to dig. He didn't argue, just dug. The earth gave easily beneath the shovel, soft with the season. We moved in rhythm, not perfect, but steady. At one point, I sat on the bench beneath the birch tree. He joined me, dirt under his fingernails, sweat on his brow. This feels better, he said. Then what? Then before? I didn't ask him to define before. We both knew. He looked out over the yard. You know, I think about that plate a lot. The one you handed to Megan. I waited. That moment? It felt like the world split. Like I saw myself from the outside for the first time. And I didn't like what I saw. You weren't raised to take like that, I said. I know. But you were allowed to. He nodded. You were always there to catch me. I didn't realize I was falling. You weren't, I said. You were floating, on me. He didn't argue. I'm glad you let go, he said. I didn't let go, I corrected. I stepped out from under you. We sat in silence. Then he asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "I regret waiting as long as I did to stop." He looked at me, not hurt, just taking it in. "I needed to become someone else," I said. "And to do that, I had to stop being everyone else's version of me." He nodded. "I think I'm trying to do that too." "That's the real work," I said. "Not success, not impressing people, just becoming someone you can sit with in silence." We sat there a long while, listening to the garden, the birds, the distant hum of someone's lawnmower starting up. The world, still spinning, still moving, but for once not dragging us with it. Eventually, he stood, stretched, wiped his hands on his jeans. "I'll be back next weekend," he said. "Good," I replied. "The compost pile won't turn itself." He smiled and walked off, his shoulders relaxed, not carrying anything that wasn't his anymore. I stayed on the bench. The birch leaves rustled gently above me. A squirrel darted along the fence. The sun had fully reached the garden now, touching the soil, warming the space where new things might grow. Inside, the phone sat silent. No buzzing. No demands. The notebook was on the table where I'd left it. What I forgot I loved. I didn't add anything new. I didn't need to. Some lists don't end. They just keep breathing. I looked out at the garden one more time. Then I went inside. I made another cup of tea, this time with honey, and sat by the front window. The chair creaked beneath me. The sun moved. The world kept turning. And I let it. If you've read this far, you're likely not here just for a story. Maybe you've felt what I've felt, forgotten, dismissed, used up, pushed aside by the very people you thought would hold you upright. Let me tell you something simple and true. You can stop saying yes. You can change the rules halfway through the game. You can become someone new in a quiet kitchen with no witnesses. You don't need permission to reclaim your life. You only need a Tuesday morning, a plate that's finally yours, and the choice to stop handing it away. Start there, and don't explain yourself.